Right, I think we're 4 o'clock. We're missing a few people, but that's fine. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Because there's so many of us today, what I propose to do is mute you all by default. If that's all right, because there's obviously a lot of people and if we're all talking. If you've got any questions, we could try the chat. I don't know if you've all seen the chat facility in Zoom. So that's one option. The other option is I'm thinking, I put it in the email this morning, that I'm going to do a special session, just a Q&A session, just purely on questions and answers, because there will probably be questions that arise out of this. So I'll do a fourth. I'm doing 3 webinars, one today, one next week, on more advanced layouts, and then the following week on WooCommerce specifically. And then I'll do a 4th one, which will just be dedicated for a Q&A. So if you do have any specific questions, it would be a great place to share and explain that. So I think I'll just crack on. Right, hello everyone, welcome. So this is introduction to the WordPress block editor. So I'm going to send you after this session a recording of the webinar, and I'm also going to send you all the slides as well. So you get all that, and I'll email that probably early tomorrow morning. So here we go. So the block editor was released in 2018, and it came with WordPress version 5. So WordPress version 5 came out in December 2018, and it included a brand new editor. The project as they were building it was called Gutenberg. So you may have heard that term around, but it's now more commonly known as the block editor. So the first question is, why did WordPress need a brand new editor? And one of the main reasons was that the original editor was built primarily at a time when websites were primarily built for text. So I thought it'd be quite useful just to show you before we dive into the block editor, just quickly, the old editor. So this is the old editor that I've got up on the screen. And you probably used this before. You put in a page title, and it's very limited what you can do in it. So in terms of, it's fine if you want to add some text, like so. And you can add headings in. But in terms of any kind of complex page layout, it's kind of impossible. So if you want to do columns and things like that, you couldn't do that. You could add images, but that's about it. So there's a whole growth of plugins around trying to make this a better experience for people. But essentially, the old editor was just a very simple word processor. That was it, really. And so hence the new editor was born. And really the whole purpose of the new editor is that it wants it to make it easier for you to create nicer looking websites, more rich websites. So I'm going to give you a demo and talk you through some of the main features of it. So this is a site that's got it running. I have a page ready. I'm just going to talk you through some of the basic things first, and then we'll show you some more advanced stuff. So this is it here. And you can still use it as a simple word processor if you want to. So there's no reason why you can't simply just type in here. And it's quite similar to the old editor. You can just type text in here. But the whole concept of the new editor is that everything on your page becomes a block. Hence why it's called the block editor. And there are certain advantages for why turning things into blocks. When you first start building a page or a post, because this works in page and posts with the new block editor, your kind of core block that you'll create is the paragraph block. So if you just type something on the page, you'll be creating a paragraph block. Okay, that's kind of your starting element. And you know it's a block because when you hover over it, you get this box around it. That's telling me that that's actually a block. Okay, so a few other things to say here. Each block that you add into your page or post comes with its own unique set of options to customize it. And you'll see all those over here on the right-hand side here. Okay, so a few things here. The first is it's going to tell you up here what block you're actually working on. So this is a paragraph block, which is, as I said, is the most simple type of block you're going to add into your pages. But there are many, many other types of blocks in fact, about 100 blocks that you can use now on your pages, the paragraph being the most simple one. And excuse me, you'll see the customization options over here on the right-hand side to do with this paragraph block. So for example, with this one, we can do things like add a drop cap. You see this little option here? That's just built in, and it gives you one of those drop caps there, which you see that sort of thing quite a lot in print publishing. And in the old days of the old editor, you couldn't do that by default. And if you do want to do it, you'd have to add a plugin and probably some codes around that to be able to accomplish the same thing. But it's just built into the editor. A few other things on the right-hand side here, we've got color settings. And in here, we can do things like set the background color. So you have to set the background color of that block. And I can also change the text color, which again was completely impossible in the old editor. You just couldn't approach doing anything like this. It just wasn't possible. So that's that. Now the options that appear here over on the right-hand side will vary depending on the type of block that you're going to add into your pages. Okay, this is the paragraph block, so we've got these settings. But you'll see when I add some other blocks in a few minutes, these settings will change accordingly. Then over here, you'll see above the block, we've got some other options that appear here as well. Now, some of these will relate purely to the block you're working on. Now, this is a paragraph block, so we've got some formatting options here, like we can center the text, we can make certain words bold or italic, and we can add hyperlinks in here as well. These are all related to this block. These three dots here will appear on every single block that you add into your page. Whatever block you're using, you'll always see those three dots because you've got things in there which are common to all blocks. For example, you can duplicate blocks or you can remove them. So that's how you can delete a block. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of the paragraph block. But I'm going to add another block underneath. Now there's a couple of ways that you can add extra blocks into your pages. The first is you can click on this plus sign up here. The second way, which is the way I personally do it, is you just hit return. So you just make sure your cursor's at the end of the line here and hit return. And just by doing that, that will actually create a new block. Now we can't see anything, but it's there. If we just typed, that would create a paragraph block. But what I want to show you next is this plus here. Okay, so in here is all the blocks that are in your tool set. So let me show you this. So you click on add block, and that's going to open up the block library. So these are just part of WordPress now. So these are available on every single WordPress website. That I haven't added any plugins in here. These are just part of WordPress. So a few things to say here. The first is the first 9 blocks you see here. Now each of these is an individual block, and you can work out what most of them do by their name. Some are a bit more difficult to understand straight off, but you'll get to know what they do. The first 9 that you see on this screen will be the blocks that you use most often. They're the blocks that you're probably going to be using day to day. So over time, they'll be personalized to you what appears there, which is quite useful. But if I scroll down, you'll see I've got these other panels, and in each of these other panels are more blocks. So let me just show you this. If I click on common blocks, you see I've got things like paragraph, gallery. I'll come back to cover in a few minutes because that's exciting. I've got a quote, image heading, file. That lets you create a download to like a PDF, which is quite useful, audio, video, etc. And in each of these, we've got further blocks. So you can see this like a tool set of blocks, and they all do interesting things. There's the columns block, which is really cool, which I'll show you again in a few minutes. We've got this widgets panel in here, and then embed. So you can embed things like things from YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Okay. So those are your core set of blocks that you get. One more thing to say here is, can you see at the top here, you can also search for blocks. So as you start to know what's in your tool set, you'll probably end up using that quite a bit, because it just lets you search for blocks. So let me show you the cover block, because that's quite exciting. So the cover block, I've just searched for it in there and it's found it. So what the cover block lets us do is add a photo and then write some text over it. So it's very common. You might see this on the front page of a website. So it can be really, really useful. So let me show you this. I just click on cover. And then it's going to ask me either to choose a background color or to choose a photo from my media library. So I'm going to choose media library. Now, I already have some photos here, but you could obviously upload new ones. Let's choose this one here. Okay, so that's my photo. I just select it, and you'll see it comes into the page now, and it's prompting me to write a headline over it. Okay, which again, just by doing it, that was completely impossible in the old editor. Just wasn't part of it. You just couldn't do it. Okay, so that's the cover block, which is really cool. Now, if I want to add a block under here, I just click on the plus sign, or I could just type. If it was just a paragraph, I could just type here. So let me just write some text. And then if I want to add one underneath, I hit return, click the plus, and let's maybe add a gallery block next. So the gallery block lets you add a nice photo gallery. And I'll just choose multiple photos here. And we should have a nice gallery. So that's the gallery block. Okay, so you can see how quick it is to build a pretty rich page. Okay, a few other things to say. Sometimes when you're working in the block editor, and the other thing to say here is if any of you have used MailChimp, it's quite similar now to using the MailChimp editor if you've used MailChimp, the email designer. So sometimes when you're working within blocks, it can be a little bit complex to know which block you're working on. So there's a few ways to check that. The first is, firstly, you need to click on the block. So I've clicked on this cover block here, and it'll tell you over here on the right-hand side. Can you see it's actually telling me this is cover? The other way, which is super useful, is these 3 lines up here. Okay, you'll find it as you use this editor more and more, you'll use those and come to love them. They'll show you the hierarchy of the block you're in, especially when you're nesting blocks within other blocks. Okay, because the cover block here actually consists of 2 blocks. It's the background image and this paragraph. You'll see when I click in this text here, can you see how it's changed over here? So sometimes you just need to be sure of which bit of the block you're working on, and this will tell you. So if I want to edit the image, I would click on those 3 lines and click on cover. Okay, now the cover block's really lots of fun because you can do all sorts of things with it. For example, you can change the height just by dragging this little blue dot up and down here. Okay, it will tell you the height over here on the right in pixels. So if you just want to type the pixels in there, you can if you want to be really precise. You've also got over here this focal point. So you can actually change the focal point of the image just by dragging this little circle around, which can be really helpful if you've got a face here and you're trying to move the text away from the face. That can be really useful. A few other things here. You can also set an overlay for your cover block. So you can set a color and then change the opacity on it. See how I'm just dragging that slider to change the opacity, which is really whizzy. Again, this was all impossible in the old editor, but you can see how easy it is to be creative with this. It's fantastic. Okay, one more other nice thing on the cover block that is really nice is the fact that you can put other blocks within it now. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to put a subtitle, I can just hit return and write some text in. So now if I look at the hierarchy here, can you see I've got the cover block and then paragraph, paragraph. And then, for example, if I wanted to put a nice call to action button underneath this, again, I can hit return to add a new block because that's adding a new block within this block. And then I can search for the buttons block. So the buttons is another block that comes with WordPress now that lets you add nice buttons into your pages. Now I'm adding this into the cover block, but you could put these anywhere because they're blocks. So let me show you. Just click on buttons and then you write your text for what you want the button to say. Okay. If you want to link that button, which you would do, this is how you'd create a link. So that's where you'd link that button to. So after somebody clicks on it, didn't want to do that. After somebody clicks on it, that's the URL they would go to. So that might be your contact page on your site or your booking page, whatever page you want them to go to. The other nice thing about this block, this button block, is if you look over on the right here, can you see that I can customize it? So I can change the background color of the button, just like that. And I can also change the border radius. Now the border radius is going to create that nice curve to it. So by default, it'll probably be square, but if you want to change that, you can change it. So it's really elegant. The other really cute thing about the button block is you can add multiple buttons now. So let's add another one. Okay, and again, you can style that button differently if you want to, and you can link it to something else. And finally, we probably want to align them. So to align it, I'm going to select the top level because the buttons block contains 2 buttons within it. And now when I select the top level buttons block, I can actually align it. That catches a lot of people out trying to align the buttons block, but that's how you do it. You just have to select that you're at the top level buttons here because the buttons contains 2 buttons within it, if that makes sense. Okay. So that's a really pretty complicated layout, but it's only taken a few minutes to do, and it's all built into the core editor. So that's the cover block. Let me show you a few other blocks. Actually, a few more things to say. Because they're blocks now, you can move them around on the page very easily. For example, if I wanted this cover block to be above this paragraph here, can you see when you click on a block, you get these arrows appear over on the left? Up and down arrows in this case. So let's just move it up. And it just moves up. You see every block you can do the same thing to. You can actually drag and drop them as well, just by grabbing that little grabby thing there. But I often find that just moving them up and down like that is a bit more of a consistent way to work with it. Oh, we're getting some questions, so I didn't see your questions. I think I'll come back to those at the end, if that's all right. Let's have a look. Michael, I'm recording it for you. So I'm recording this whole thing, everyone. Cool, I'm going to answer your questions at the end. They're good questions. Right, a few other things to say. These 3 dots can be really, really useful. I use this editor an awful lot every single day, and the ones that I use most often are duplicate and another one. So I'm going to duplicate this block, and you see how it's just duplicated it. And then if I wanted to change the image, for example, I could just change the image really quickly and change the title. You get the idea. So duplication can really save you a whole bunch of time. The other really exciting thing about the cover block is this option here. You can make them fixed background. That creates that really nice parallax effect. You see as I scroll up and down, the background stays frozen. It's just an option, this toggle here. So you can use it to great effect to have these nice reveals. The other really useful thing here in these 3 dots, because remember these 3 dots are, oh, some great questions coming in. These 3 dots appear on every single block that you add into your page. So one of the most useful ones is this add to reusable. So what you can do is you can save them to a library of reusable blocks. So let me show you this. You just save it to reusable. So you may have taken, a while to create your block, but you actually want to use it in other parts of your website. So you might have designed like a call to action and you want to show it in your blog, or you might want to show it throughout your site. Well, you can do that now. You just give it a name and save it, and that will now appear. Let me just update this. That will now appear in your block library. So if I go add new block and scroll down, you'll see at the bottom here, can you see reusable? And in there is the one I've just used. Now I've just put it on the same page, which I wouldn't normally do, but you get the idea. That block is now saved to my library that I could use when I'm creating a blog post or any other page on my site. So reusable libraries are really, 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 really useful. Right, let's go and have a look at the page. So I've just updated it, and let's go and view it. So there's my page, and can you see as I scroll up and down, I get these really nice parallax effect on these big sort of hero images at the top. So it's looking pretty cool. It's all mobile friendly, so these will all squish for mobiles out the box. Gutenberg is built to be mobile friendly, which is ace. A couple of things to show you on this. So one of the nice options with the cover, well, let's get rid of this one. One of the nice things that you can do with the cover block is these options in here. The most useful one, especially if you're creating home pages or you want nice landing pages, is this option here, full width. You can set that block to be full width, so it should, see how it's now stretching, bleeding right the way across the page there. This second one hasn't been set, so you see it's just taking the normal margins of the website. Let's go and fix that up. And I'll set this one to be full width as well. There we go. So you can see how you can create these pretty smart looking pages quite quickly with this thing. Let's just go back to edit page here. Right, one of the most useful blocks that you'll ever use when you'll start using this block editor, and this will not sound exciting at all at the moment, but you'll find you probably use this, you'll end up using this block more than any other block. I certainly do. And it's this one. Let me show you. So can you see on this is a great example actually here. I probably like a little bit more space between this paragraph and this photograph. So to do that, the block we're going to use is a great block, and it's called the spacer block. So let's add it. So I'm just going to search for it here. Now the spacer block kind of says what it does. All it does is it lets you add space between blocks. But it's incredibly useful because it lets you lay out your elements on your page really, really easily. And you'll see you can either drag it visually here to change the pixels. We're working in pixels here. But you can also set them over here on the right in the customizer over here. So if you want to have complete consistency through your site, you can do it. Here we go. And you'll see that's just got a little bit more space now. Okay. Right, a couple of other things to show you. When you click on a block, I've talked you through these options here, but you'll also see this option over here on the left. So that can be really useful. So what that lets you do, that lets you change the block from one type of block to another block. Okay. You can transform blocks between different types of blocks. So this is a paragraph block. So I could transform it into a heading block if I wanted to, without having to reinsert a heading block and create a heading block. Or I could take it back to a quote block, or I could convert it back to a paragraph block. But what you can transform a block to will depend entirely on how it started out. So I couldn't transform this block, this paragraph block, into a gallery block because it's a text-based block, basically. Okay. Right, I want to show you one more block, which is really, really useful in terms of the core blocks, and that's the column block. So now you can add columns in your pages. This is one of the most useful blocks you're going to use. So it's just a block again, so let's add it here. When you first add it, it's going to ask you what proportions and how many columns you want to add. So let's just do a 2-column layout. And it's going to bring that into the space here. And then it's basically set out the layout for you. And then within each of these, you can add different blocks in here. So you could add any other type of block in here. So for example, I could let's just put a paragraph in this one. And let's put a gallery in this one. Like so. Okay. So that's a really nice, useful block as well, the column block. And also you can do, there we go. There's my nice layout. Just using the column block. And then I'll just show you one more which is pretty useful, and that is the media and text block, which is a common question I get asked a lot. Let's do this on a new page, actually. This is the media and text block. And that lets you align an image with some content to the right, which is a really common question when people use WordPress. So let's go here. You can put your content in here. I put too much content in there. Okay. So the other nice thing you can do with this one is you can set a background color for it. Right, let's go here. So you can achieve this sort of nice effect. And can you see how you can actually drag this middle thing around here? And again, you can put blocks within blocks here. So you can see the sort of layouts you can achieve pretty easily. Let's add a buttons block in just to finish off. You get the idea. Let's add some radius. So that's the media and text block. Really nice block. You can also, you see here, these are quite useful actually. So you can switch them around just like that without having to recreate it. So if you wanted it, let's go that way actually. And you can also align the text vertically here. And you won't see that until you publish it normally. Let's have a look. There we go. You get the idea. Cool. Right. Importantly, there's some settings that you need to be aware of as well when you're using the. Somebody's just asked about a slider block. We'll come back to the questions at the end. I won't jump in now. It's a good question. Yeah, there's some settings you need to be aware of. The most important is this. So when you first start using the block editor, if tonight you go off and start using it, it will probably look like this. And this is full screen mode. And it got implemented in the latest release of WordPress. And it's royally annoyed everyone because then you can't see your dashboard. Like all this stuff on the left you normally see has gone. There's some rationale for doing it because it gives you more room, more screen collateral to design your pages. But a lot of people want to see their dashboards again. And to do that, you just click on these three dots here and you just deselect full screen mode. Okay. And you'll see it comes back. So personally for me, that's the way I like to work. I like to see the stuff on the left. It's just the three dots and just make sure full screen isn't selected. It got set by default in the last update, which confused a lot of people. So that's how you can turn it off. You'll also see some tools down here. Probably the two most interesting ones are Block Manager. So if you don't want to see all these blocks that are appearing in here, in the block library, you can actually manage them now in the Block Manager. You see, you can just turn them on and off in here. And this can be useful if you're building sites for clients as well. Okay. Also, if you're ever working in the block editor and you don't see these options over here on the right, which might happen, it's because somebody has clicked this little icon here, this settings icon. So that hides the right-hand customizer. So if you're going crazy one day thinking, how do I customize these blocks? It's probably because that's been clicked. So just click on it and you'll see your, look at that, isn't that cool? You'll see your settings will reappear. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of why I love the block editor so much. I just want to talk you through kind of some other stuff around it. So I've just covered some of these blocks. These are the blocks. So one of the really exciting so everything we've covered so far is really the core WordPress. So if you just went off to your hosting company tonight, installed WordPress, and started using the new block editor, which is WordPress now. That's what you get. But there are some plugins that supercharge Gutenberg. So there has been an explosion of plugins where people are building some really cool stuff for it. So I just want to talk you through, give you a hint of what's possible. So when you plug, all plugins will create new blocks for you to use in that block library. Here's an example of 3, 2 of them are ours. So when you add a plugin, it will add extra blocks into that block library for you. Okay. And here's just a selection of some guys out there that are building some really cool plugins for blocks. There's some really exciting stuff going on. And there's a real mixture of the sort of stuff we're seeing. And they fall, I'm just going to show you a few examples from each of these categories I put on the screen, just to give you a hint of what's possible with plugins. So we'll start with design blocks. So this is an example of a plugin that we've built called the Caxton Shape Divider block. And all it is a block that lets you create these nice shape dividers within your pages. It's just a block where you can change the shape of the that's shown here. And you can also change the color of it. There's also some more advanced layout blocks. So the columns block is getting better and better in Gutenberg, but there are some plugins out there that let you create some really complex layouts. Again, this is an example of, I'm using some of my plugins here because I know them so well. This is a page that's been built with this Caxton layout block, where you can create these really nice grids. All we've done here is add the layout block and add a background for each block and some text, but you can create these really cool effects. There are also a whole bunch of plugins that, and I'm going to cover this on the third webinar in much more detail. There's a whole bunch of WooCommerce blocks. So WooCommerce now comes with its own set of blocks built into it that you can utilize. In fact, let me show you quickly on this site. So this is just part of WooCommerce. If anyone out there is running a WooCommerce store, let me create a page. WooCommerce have built a whole bunch of blocks that you can utilize in your sites. And again, this site's got them on, and you'll just see them down here in WooCommerce. And here they are. They do all sorts of stuff. But you can obviously you could put these on any page or within a post, and you can handpick products here. You get the idea. And it's just going to bring those products into that page, and then you can change the columns over here, like so. We've also built some WooCommerce blocks. I'll show you quickly. So we have a plugin called Storefront Blocks that lets you bring WooCommerce blocks in and create some really nice layouts for them. You see this is an example here, where again you can handpick the products. You can also turn off titles and things. You can change the number of rows and change the grid gap and all sorts of whizzy stuff. But again, they're all blocks, so you can see how quickly I'm doing this, and there's nothing technical to get this sort of really cool layout. So there's a whole bunch of e-commerce blocks that have been developed. This is another one that we've built, which is a masonry product block. And this is a sales countdown block, so you can do these nice dynamic sales countdowns, but they're all blocks. So there's nothing technical to get these up and running. And that's an example of a product block. There are also a slew of gallery blocks out there that you can use. This is an example of a gallery block that's called Block Gallery, and it's by a company called CodeBlocks, and it does a really, really lovely photo carousel effect, like we're seeing here. Really simple to get up and running. There are also contact form blocks that you can use. This is an example from the Ninja Forms plugin, and it comes as a block. So again, you can add this to a contact page, or you can put this anywhere you like on your site. It's just a block. And there are also some social media blocks out there. These are actually the core ones that are just part of the block library. So if you're using WordPress, you'll have these. They're called social icons. And you can obviously customize them and put the ones you want in. There are also some post blocks that you can use. So if you want to dynamically bring some posts into a page, for example, if you want your home page to have a nice banner, but underneath you might want to have latest news from us, there are some post blocks. This is another block that we built, which is part of our free plugin called Caxton. Lets you bring your posts into this nice post grid. And again, you can customize it and do all sorts of whizzy stuff with it. This is really interesting. So there are also some SEO blocks that are available to you as well. So this I'm not going to dive into too much detail, but this is a plugin that lets you add structured content within your pages, but they come as blocks. What these are doing, actually, they're under the bonnet. They're telling Google what this content is about, so they can really help your search ranking. So the really nice thing about blocks is that they can be mixed and matched and customized pages and posts. So that's important. You can use this on pages and posts. Right, a few other things to say. The first is Gutenberg, or the block editor, has been very, very controversial in the WordPress community. So there's been it's kind of like a Marmite. Some people won't understand that. So it's black and white for a lot of people. There's some people love it, some people hate it, and there's not many 2 or 3 star reviews if you go and read about it. Partly that was because how it was introduced to the community. Partly that is because it's brand new. And partly that is because other people's sites have been built on old frameworks. Michael, under the bonnet means kind of the code. Good question. Michael just asked, what does under the bonnet mean? It means code. What's really going on underneath? Yeah, so the block editor has been really, really controversial. I'm a huge fan because I teach a lot of beginners in the UK, and I see the reaction to it, and people absolutely love it if they're coming to WordPress afresh generally. But it has had that sort of reaction to some people. Now, also, some themes and plugins disable the new block editor. Okay, so we support a lot of plugins, and we see this a lot where themes and plugins or agencies are disabling the block editor by default. So when you're creating a new page, you're not actually seeing the new block editor. You're seeing the old editor and just wondering what's going on. So there are some themes and some plugins that do have settings in them to disable the new block editor. There is one plugin in particular called the Classic Editor. So if you have that active on your website, your site will not be using the block editor. Okay. So you could just deactivate that and the block editor would be available for you. There are some themes also that have settings in them to deactivate it. Avada and Divi being 2 of the most kind of popular ones. So if you're using Divi and you're not seeing the block editor, there is a setting in it. Now I've just shown you the Divi setting today, but there are similar settings for the other, for some themes and WP Bakery, where somebody may have disabled the block editor. Okay, so you'll see in Divi on the screen here, there's an option to enable the Classic Editor. So that means you won't be able to use a block editor, but it's very simple to get it up and running. Just make sure it's not disabled. Okay, so I just want to finish off with, because we're kind of out of time, but that's good. 5 reasons why I think you should probably start thinking about using Gutenberg fairly soon if you're not already. And then I will go through some of the questions as well, because they're good questions. Right, so here's some of the big advantages of using the new block editor. Now I do a lot of work with organizations and small companies, and one of the big problems they've got is when somebody leaves the organization and somebody else has to pick up the website and learn it from scratch. And often those sites might have been built using 20 or 30 different plugins with 5 different interfaces to build the pages out, and they come to these sites and they have absolutely no idea how they've been built. So the new block editor hopefully is going to make it easier for organizations, because hopefully we'll all move towards using one interface, which is the block editor interface. So when you look at a WordPress website, you'll be able to start using it pretty quickly if it's using the block editor. This is a good one. So themes don't have to be so complex in the future. So a few of you have mentioned Divi, which I used Divi for a long, long time, but Divi is getting bigger and bigger in terms of, sorry, just seen a comment. Divi is getting more and more complex in terms of what it's doing, because it's having to do so much that really a theme shouldn't be doing. Themes really should, in my view, should just be about the design, whereas the block editor should be doing a lot of the layout stuff for you these days. So the task of what themes are going to be is becoming simpler, and as a result of that, your site will become faster. Also, changing theme will become much, much easier in the future. So ideally, my recommendation would be use a nice lightweight theme that's just concerned with the style, and then use the block editor to do a lot of the page layout stuff that's traditionally done by some of these themes like Divi. Here's a huge reason for it. So one of the huge advantages of using the new block editor is that you have access to the WordPress ecosystem. So if you're using, a few of you have mentioned Elementor, and a few of you have mentioned Divi. If you're using those products, which are, you know, thoroughbred products, no doubt, but they're all closed systems. So people might have built add-ons for them, but the block editor is now, it's WordPress. So there's been an explosion of people building third-party blocks for it. So you'll have complete access to that huge ecosystem within WordPress to add into your pages if you use the block editor. So just this week, so this is the old editor, probably won't be here forever. So regardless of how some people view the block editor, it's not gonna, the old editor probably won't be here for ever. And in fact, just this week, WordPress.com announced they're retiring the old editor. So this isn't the same as WordPress.org, which is what many of your sites will be running on the software. But WordPress.com announced they're retiring the old editor, which is a big indication of where this stuff is going. The old editor won't be here forever. The other thing is that there's some really, really exciting stuff that's coming. So at the moment, the stuff I've shown you today is primarily concerned with editing pages and posts. Where this is really heading is we're going to be editing the whole website with Gutenberg down the track, not too long away. We're going to be editing the headers, the menus, the footers. So your whole site will probably be built with blocks in not too distant future. So it's a really good idea to start thinking about moving across to it fairly soonish, I would. So full site editing is coming. There's also a thing called block patterns are coming. So a few of you mentioned this on the questions actually. So this is the idea that you're going to be able to bring whole page layouts into your pages. There'll be basically layouts comprised of blocks, the preset templates that will just load into your pages. And some themes are starting to do this already. And then I just wanted to, the final thing I wanted to show you is, so we're obviously, we've invested a lot in developing our own blocks over the last 2 years, right from the start. And I just want to show you something that we're working on at the moment that will give you a sense, hopefully, of what's coming down the track. So this was literally, this isn't ready yet. This is a sneak peek. So this is, I've got 2 videos to show you, very short. But this is showing you drag and drop within Gutenberg, which is, we only finished this last night at 2 o'clock, so it's very new. But you'll see this example here I'm going to play. This is the block editor, but in this video, this block here is just going to be dragged. Let me show you this. So you see I can just pick it up and drag it across here. It's very complicated, but you can see this. We're just using blocks again, but this is drag and drop now within Gutenberg, which is something we're working on. So show you one more time, you just pick it up and drag it across. And then the second video is this. So one of the really nice things you can do is this sort of thing. And again, this is something we're developing at the moment. I just wanted to give you a sneak peek. See how you can just pick it up and move it across. So this is how you can do nice overlays within the block editor. And again, we could add any third-party blocks into this page because we're just using blocks. So we've got access to that whole block library. Any blocks we want to, we can add in here. And then finally down here, here's just an example of the page I was actually building. You see that sort of layout? But those are all blocks. So where this is going is incredibly exciting. Gutenberg is fairly new, but it's getting better all the time. Final thing before I will go through some of your questions, because there's some great questions, is Gutenberg exists as a plugin and part of the core software. Okay, so it's when they first introduced Gutenberg, they built it as a plugin, and then you could install that plugin on your site if you wanted to experience the new editor. It still exists as a plugin, so you can go and download the Gutenberg plugin and add it to your sites. And the plugin is always a couple of steps ahead of what's in the core software. So if you want to see what's coming down the track in terms of what will come into the core software, you can go and download the Gutenberg plugin and start playing with it and see because it's always got some more advanced features in it that you'll get in your standard WordPress. It might be a little bit more glitchy, I suppose, than what's in the core, But if you want to experience kind of the cutting edge stuff, you can go and download it as a plugin. Brilliant, thank you all. I'm just going to dive through some of your questions here because there's lots of questions. We'll see how we go. Right, first one. Do you think the block editor is a partial replacement for Poodle Page Builder, which is one of our plugins? I think it will be at some point. It's not quite there yet, but you see some of the stuff I've just shown you. I think if we can crack that, because our page builder was all about drag and drop really, and being able to position things on the page, which you still can't really do with the Gutenberg block editor. I think if we crack this, then yeah, it will potentially it'll get there. Can we pull this? Okay, next question. So how does this relate to Divi Builder? Is it an alternative to Divi or just a theme option? Yeah, it's a straight out alternative to Divi for sure. If you go back and at the birth of Gutenberg, there was lots of talk about whether it was going to become a fully fledged page builder or not and compete with things like Divi. And there was lots of skirting around the issue as far as I'm concerned. For me, where this is heading, it's absolutely in that space. It's not quite there yet, so you can still do more advanced stuff with Divi than you can with Gutenberg, because Divi has been around a lot longer. But the thing that Divi doesn't have is the ability to add third-party blocks into your, or easily within a Divi layout. And of course, you're not. So my view is it probably will be an alternative. Okay, let's see if we... Lots of Divi questions. Can you easily duplicate a whole page? Yes, well, yeah, you could just get a plugin called duplicate page, I think, or duplicate post it's called. It does pages as well, where you can just duplicate pages. So that's one way to do it. Or you could just save your blocks as reusable blocks. You will at some point with the block editor be able to save them as layouts, but we're not quite there yet. Okay, there's a good question here. I learned that you can drag and drop blocks up and down, but is there any option to drag a block into another block? Yes, there is. Let me show you this. So let's add a column block here. Let's add an image block. Oh, one more thing to show you actually. So if you, this is a pro tip, there are two ways to add blocks into your pages. You can either click on plus new here, and either search for the block or find the block you want to use. Or if you know the name of your block, you can just hit / and then start typing the name of the block. That's a kind of quicker way to do it. So let's find the image block. Let's go here. Okay, let's just resize this. So with this little draggy thing here, you can actually just pick them up and drag them. See how I've just dragged it into that column. So they are true drag and drop. It'll denote here by that to tell me where I want to do it. So yeah, it is proper drag and drop. Can you have paragraph scrolling inside a cover block? Paragraph scrolling, I'm not quite sure what that means. So we'll come back to that one, Daniel, if that's all right. Is Gutenberg compatible with Elementor? Well, they're separate things. Elementor, you can now insert Gutenberg blocks within Elementor, within your pages. So that there's a level of compatibility. For sure. All right, some people have answered the question. Slider block. Yeah, so within Caxton, which is one of our plugins. So the question was, is there a slider block? There's quite a few. We have one within Caxton, which is a slider block. Michael, which you might want to use. Is there a plugin to wrap text to an image that is not square or has an irregular shape? Not that I know of. Good question. Roger, best way to flow text around an image? Yeah, so this was one of the things that annoyed most people to start with. So it's a great question. And I still struggle with it. Let me show you how you do it. So if you want to have text in an image, so let me just grab some text. Let's say you want to have an image to the right of your text. The way you have to do it is you add the text and then you add the image block. Let's add an image. And then you have to set that image to be aligned right. Ooh, and move it up. Can you see like that? That's how you do it. So in the old editor, that was easier to do, but that's how you do it in the new editor. I think that's what you wanted. And then the text will naturally wrap around that. So if I just type, how it wraps around, that's how you do it. The theme we're using on this is Astra. That's the theme we're using. Is there a view to see mobile view while building the blocks? That's a good question. Well, you can, yeah, there is. I'll come back to that one. There is, and I can't remember how to do it. Good question. Do all blocks load on every page, whether they are used or not? For example, would using several block plugins slow down the site? No, they shouldn't do. They should only load, if they've been built properly, they'll only load on the pages they've been built on. Is it possible to show or hide blocks on mobile? Great question. There is a plugin in, I may have the right one, it's called Editor's Kit, which should let you do that, Editor's Kit. It's a really neat plugin. As part of our Caxton plugin, we have an option, let me just create a page, which won't let you hide them. Let's add a layout. So let's say we're doing a layout. So we have some mobile options built in here. Can you see here? So this is how it would look on a mobile phone, and this is how it would look on a tablet. So you can have a different layout for tablets and mobile phones. So by default, it's going to stack them. But you can change the layout. So if I wanted the top one to appear to span, as I move it smaller, can you see? Oh, I don't think I chose it. We'll come back to that. Oh, we'll come back to that one.
It did work, Jamie.
Did it? Thank you. Great question from Bethany. How will your absolute positioning take into account mobile and other devices? Looks very cool. Yeah, that's the next bit, Bethany. Good question. We've got to do that next. So what I showed you with the absolute positioning, we literally cracked that this morning. So it's the next thing we want to do. Can I convert a page built in Page Builder into a Gutenberg page? No, you can't, unfortunately. You need to, at the moment, you need to recreate it. That's all from me. I think we're out of questions. Does anyone have any other questions? Brilliant, thank you all. So I will email you all copy of the slides and the video. Thanks everyone, it's been great. Sorry if I'm sweating, but it's really hot in here. It's actually sunny in England today. And I'll send you all the slides. I'll send you a copy of the recording, and I'll hopefully see some of you next week where we're going to get more advanced in terms of some page layouts and some other exciting stuff. Thank you all.
Fantastic, Jamie. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Thank you.